Hello
Happy Friday.
and welcome. Let's start off with some announcements. First announcement, Tuesday will be your 12.1 and 12.2 quiz. Please use the review list on PSL to study up on those topics.
Where's yours located?
On today's PSL page, and yours?
On the Module 12 page.
Excellent. Quick rundown of what we're going to be doing today. We're going to go over last night's homework, which was an issue for some of you, turning off the pop-up. Is it a school issued or your own iPad? Hopefully you use the online textbook. If not, we did have the PDF available. From there, we're going to go over some Korean textbooks and review those as well. So let's kick off with the Korean War questions. But before we do that, if you look at this GIF or GIF, it's a great summation of what happens. The blue representing the UN and South Korean forces, the red representing the North Koreans, and the Chinese who were trained by the Soviets. You'll notice that a lot of it is inactive because of the peace negotiations. If this were to continue to today, nothing would change. So all the fighting was initial. So with that as our backdrop, let's review the first question. How did the outcome of China's civil war affect U.S. response to North Korea's attack?
Well, Mr. J, in 1949, when Mao Zedong and the Communist Party took over China, it was a huge perceived threat to the United States. Seeing as how we've mostly had communism contained in Europe up until this point.
Policy of containment, shout out to President Truman.
Major concern now that communism will spread to other Asian countries. So it's almost like a whole new theater of the world, if you will, has now been exposed.
And a great analogy for this is a domino theory. If one country were to fall, then another country, and before you know it, communism will have spread throughout all of Asia. We may see this with our next major conflict. Remember, this was not a war. All right, let's move on to number 2.
Go ahead.
According to the speakers in the video, if you were able to watch it, why was the start of the Korean War a significant event of the Cold War?
And some of you might have just made an inference if you didn't see the video, right? And I think a big inference you could make without even watching the video is related to the Soviet Union, if we can start there. Especially the fact that even though we won't engage in active combat with the Soviet Union during the Cold War, we are almost essentially indirectly fighting them here and definitely sending a pretty strong message about how we are going to respond to the threat of communism spreading.
What we see here is a shift from those passive policies that I hope to use the answer key to review to more active policies where we are directly involved in the conflict. Remember, although this was masked as a UN police operation, 90% of the soldiers were in fact from the United States. Truman viewed this as a direct aggression. So, yeah.
As stated by Truman, they know as we do that the aggression in Korea is part of the attempt of the Russian communist dictatorship to take over the world step by step.
And it is important that after World War II, that the Soviets and the Americans divided up Korea at the 38th parallel. So the fact that this truce was being broken, that's why he would view it as a direct aggression. Good?
Good.
All right, let's move on to number 3. Do you think President Truman should have fired MacArthur? Why or why not? MacArthur is right here. He was the top-ranking military official. He served in World War I, II, and the Korean War. He was in charge of the Pacific Theater of War during World War II, so he had a lot of clout.
So, obviously, answers are going to vary here. It's an opinion question. But I think the bottom line is going to be, as adults, we can speak to this. Mr. J, is it a good idea to, let's say, speak out or criticize your boss?
Mr. Harrion and Mrs. Blackley are like the best principal and assistant principals that you will ever come across.
So that would probably lend itself to yes as an answer. He should have been. You can't necessarily do that, especially in such a public venue such as the entire nation, the entire world.
One of the hats the president wears is commander-in-chief. MacArthur thought he was the commander-in-chief, and that was not the case. After this, he contemplated running for president, but unfortunately, his former subordinate, I like Ike, Eisenhower, is actually the one that takes the Republican ticket. Let's move on. Sorry if you said no. Number 4. What were the terms of the armistice signed on July 27th, 1953?
Which took quite a while to reach this point, by the way. What was it, 2 years and 17 days was actually truce talks. And what comes out of that is a divided Korea into North and South Korea at the 38th parallel. At the line would be a demilitarized zone.
DMZ.
Which...
Not TMZ. DMZ.
Still stands today.
A couple of things about this. The reason why it occurs in 53 is we have a presidential election where Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, I like Ike was his slogan, defeats the one and only.
Oh, Adlai Stevenson. Sorry, I didn't see you pointing.
Who then runs against him again in 56 and loses again. That's why you hear that he's a perennial loser. Now, what Eisenhower said is that we should end this conflict with a quote-unquote honorable end, meaning we're not going to say we lost, but we definitely did not win. So this is the first time a Republican takes the presidency since 1928 when Hooverville himself won the presidency. Let's move on to number 5.
The 38th parallel. We could go back to 6th grade with our latitude and longitude lessons for this one, probably.
Wait, which one goes vertical and which one goes horizontal?
Well, I could tell you the best way to not remember
X, Y. Wait, that's math. So confusing. Just give it to me, Miss Lyman.
Parallel is another word for a line of latitude. And since it is dividing Korea into North and South Korea, that should make sense. Lines of latitude run from east to west. So the 38th parallel will, of course, divide the two nations as it does to this day.
And check this out. This satellite picture is on the left. That is what it looks like today. If you look here, this is, I believe, Seoul, Korea. Here is Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. I'm not sure that this could be any more conclusive on which country thrived after the conflict, although it's still technically going on. I get it, but you can see that the South Koreans definitely took advantage of the capitalist democratic society that was provided to them.
And oftentimes under communist or dictatorship type of governments, we have poor choices being made regarding the economy. Today, the best example, Kim Jong-un in North Korea spends tons and tons of money on the military, and people are literally starving in that country because of it. So I think it's just a really telling picture of the potential difference between communism and capitalism.
Remember to check out the Propaganda Game on Netflix, and it'll highlight life in North Korea. Number 6, what were the effects of the Korean War?
We have more than 130,000 Americans killed or wounded. The casualties are in the millions for Koreans and Chinese. Yesterday, we looked at how high the civilian casualties was. Of course, Korea is still divided today. If we want to get real technical about it, it hasn't ended. In fact, relations between the United States and North Korea still have tensions they're trying to work out. As of last week, Trump sat down with Kim Jong-un and they tried to come up with some agreements and end the Korean War. And it didn't work out and Trump came home early. So we still have tensions based on this conflict that occurred more than 60 years ago.
So just to add on a couple of things, we are in a unique situation because a lot of our students here at Daniel Wright are of Korean and Chinese descent and have had members fight in this conflict. So if you are one of those people, just like I encourage people from Eastern Europe to explore what it was like to live under the communist umbrella of the Soviet Union, really investigate that. Ask your family members, see what it's like. It's a precarious situation now because we have North and South Korea who don't see eye to eye, yet South Korea is our ally. Because Japan ruled Korea from 1910 to 1945, South Korea and Japan don't get along, yet they're both our allies. North Korea is propped up by China, But China doesn't get along with South Korea or Japan. So it's an entanglement that the United States has to carefully figure out each time a situation arises in that particular area of the country or world. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Taiwan, which is the official democratic country or government of China, although it was pushed off the mainland at the end of the Chinese Civil War. We do not have any inquiry questions that we're going to go, oh, yeah, never mind, we do. Write an inquiry question that will lead to the present-day implications of the Korean War.
We just talked a lot about the present-day implications of the Korean War. So, I mean, a question could even be something to the extent of, how has the Korean War affected the relationship between both the United States and China?
Or North Korea, as Ms. Lyman talked about with President Trump coming home. It was reported last night that North Korea is, in fact, still building nukes.
Yeah, in fact, their long-range missile sites were active, again, just 2 days after Trump went home. More on the Korean War.
More on the Korean War. Hopefully you guys saw this. Remember, there are 19 soldiers. The shadow or the reflection wall were supposed to represent the 38 soldiers. Allegedly, because it's on a triangle, regardless of where you are, one of the soldiers is looking at you. Now, before we move on, there is a line I want to share with you from Sir Winston Churchill, made famous, well, you guys know him as the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and he gave the Iron Curtain speech. Remember, you cannot visit the Iron Curtain because it is not real, but a quote he wrote, allegedly, probably goes back much further than this, is history is written by the victors. I want you to think about that as we discuss and explore Perspectives Standard 2.
So on your way in, you should have picked up a packet that has 2 excerpts, one labeled textbook A and one labeled textbook B. We are going to compare 2 different textbooks today, and because of that, we want to talk a little bit about perspectives. And to give you a concrete definition of that, it is a particular attitude toward or way of regarding something, a point of view. We know that a lot of things factor into our own perspectives, our background, where we came from, how we're raised, the people around us. But it's interesting to think that textbooks, which are supposed to be informational, could have different perspectives.
Hopefully you guys are thinking about the way of the subjects when we looked at during World War II and why Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. So although it is official doctrine, it could be influenced potentially by government. When we look at the second bullet point here, or third bullet point, when textbooks are offering conflicting accounts, how do you decide which textbook to believe? Hold on, I'm going to access my spidey senses, just kidding, my sourcing senses, and we'll always try to use our source material when looking at that.
Now, we're going to do something a little different.
Wait, are you calling for the boat or are you calling for the land?
I'd rather have the boat.
Sweet, because I'm not a great swimmer.
Here's what we're going to do that's a little bit interesting is we are going to have you look at 2 different textbook excerpts without the sourcing information first.
Oh my gosh, this is tricky.
So as any document does, most of the ones that we've looked at this year, textbooks can have a bias and a lot of the times only offer one perspective of the past. The best example I could think of is going to school in the deep south of the U.S.
The War of Northern Aggression.
Exactly, which, up here, we refer to that here as the Civil War, not the War of Northern Aggression. So it's all about perspective. It could be influenced by how the nation views the event. It could be influenced by how our relationships with other countries. But the bottom line is there's going to be some sort of bias even in a textbook. We have 2 different textbooks for you to look at, and they're both essentially making a claim as to who started the Korean War. So to get you started, you're going to read both excerpts.
Because you can't source it, so we're going to go straight from sourcing it
to
reading it, and then we're going to analyzing it using the document analysis questions on the next page.
So the first page is going to ask you to first compare how it's starting according to each textbook. Tell us which one you think is more trustworthy and why, using text support in your answer. And then possibly brainstorming some ideas of where to get more info since we're not really sure which one we want to believe just yet.
Wait, to clarify, we don't have to write a CER poem again?
No, you're welcome. On the back of the packet, there is sourcing information.
But don't look at it yet. That ruins the activity, so do that last.
But they don't know which one's which.
Uh,
They have to decide which one's which.
Some people have strong sourcing senses. I don't know. I don't know.
So answer the questions first, and then go to the back and determine which one is which.
Precisely. In other words, just do it in order. All right.
Get to work. When you're ready, when you're done with all of it, check out our second video where we will talk about that sheet.
Thank you. See ya.